Hello and welcome to our weekly Addis Dialogue. With it, I'm Shifaralakal. My guests today are engineer Hezkel Eskinder, the senior engineering fellow from Ohio, Mr. Gregory Copley, president of the International Strategic Studies Association, who has worked in a discrete advisory capacity to selected governments and national leaders for almost a half century, working across the spectrum of political, economic, military, and integrated policy. And of course, Professor Anne Fitz-Gerald, director of the Bolzili School of International Affairs and a professor in Wilfrid Laurier University's Political Science Department. Thank you all so much for being with us here.
You're welcome, Shivarao.
One of the issues that the brunt of which Ethiopia has to carry is misinformation and disinformation on the country coming from unsubstantiated and one-sided narratives. In your views, what are the driving factors for such reporting?
Thank you very much, Adu Shifran. Thank you for having me on the show this morning, afternoon for you. I think when we're talking about misinformation and disinformation, it's very important to recognize that we've always lived with misinformation and disinformation. It's just that now that we're living in the age of social media, this misinformation, disinformation has hit a new crescendo, and a crescendo which arguably plays havoc with people's lives on the ground, whilst the keyboard warriors battle it out in the cyberspace. So independent media plays an extraordinarily important role in our civil society, as do analysts, as do academics. All of our collective reputations are based on the integrity of our reporting and the verification of the facts. And methods like triangulation and representative sampling, these are all very important before a deeper analysis can be and should be reported on these issues. But with the new social media-based information campaigns comes a new form of adversarial tactics as well. And this is where, it comes close to warfare and conflict. A tweet planted, a response, a tweet planted, a response. And it's hard to break that adversarial tactic cycle. And we saw this in Germany in the late 1930s, of course, without social media. But we've seen this. This is something that we've lived with for quite some time now. So I think issues in the future going forward will have to focus on not just the authenticity of data, but the veracity of that data as well, and vetting this. Because propaganda tactics are used particularly in insurgency wars. And it's all about constantly trying to pressurize the other side. And maybe I'll just finish by saying the great danger in these circumstances is that an alignment emerges between misinformation, disinformation, and policy and decision making.
Mr. Copley, let me come to you. What are your suggestions to Ethiopia and friends of Ethiopia to help Ethiopia or the country unveil the realities on the ground to the international communities that need to hear the truth?
There are many realities on the ground because this is all about context. It's not all about what you see is what you get. One of the realities on the ground is that we have the TPLF reverting to its role as a separatist force. It has unlimited funds almost to prosecute the information war. And this information war will be critical. We need to look for a direct parallel in the breakup of Yugoslavia starting in 1990, 1991, when we saw that the separatist governments of Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and also the Albanian lobby poured in excess of $2 billion into PR and propaganda campaigns and did an incredible job to set the record or set the terms of the debate. And when I confronted the Serbian government at the time, they said, well, nobody would believe all of these allegations being made against us. So, people know who we are. They know our history of support for the West, our history of support for human rights and the like. I said, frankly, the world knows nothing except what they heard in the latest broadcasts. And so the Serbian government continued in this path and, of course, lost the strategic war. And the information high ground was maintained and is still maintained by governments of Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and so on. So we see that that the Yugoslavia example is absolutely opposite to Ethiopia, and as and just said, the situation is that this is now accelerated by the use of social media, but it's also accelerated not only by the fact that the TPLF on one side is creating a narrative which is being accepted by politicians and the media outside of Ethiopia. We also have to bear in mind that nobody is aware the extent which the Egyptian government has been supporting the TPLF, as it is supporting and has been supporting historically the Oromo Liberation Front and the splinter groups of the OLF. So you've got that situation. Then you've got the fact that Egypt wishes always to control the narrative on the Nile and keeps inferring that, or implying that that Nile waters are Egypt's alone and that Egypt decides those. Well, there's no legal justification for that at all. However, you get countries like the United States and even the United Kingdom and some of the European Union countries supporting Egypt because they want the trade with Egypt. They want access to Egypt's influence over the nexus of the Eurasia-Africa nexus and the Red Sea-Suez Canal trade link. So there's a natural bias there toward supporting Ethiopia, supporting Egypt rather. So really we've got a situation where all of the cards are being stacked against Ethiopia at the moment. Even the discussions which have been underway in the Democratic Republic of Congo at the moment, are really being controlled by Egypt, which then also controls to a large extent the Sudanese. And we even can see the Egyptian government forcing the Sudanese government to act against its own interests, because its own interests are in getting the electricity from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And yet the Sudanese are acting as though somehow Ethiopia is offending the sovereignty and water rights of Sudan, which is absolutely contrary to the case.
Ethiopia has to invest in massive public relations, in lobbying effort to change this narrative, which is based on false propaganda. And as I said before, the TPLF has been campaigning and making friends for the last 27, 30 years. And they have all the resources, all the connection. And everywhere we go, we are getting resistance because they have lobbied continuously, people lobbying for their interest against the interest of Ethiopia. I mean, we are doing a lot of things amongst the diaspora. We just started a lobbying group called the American Ethiopian PAC, or Public Affairs Committee. We announced this last weekend. And we are also having events like this, having Western experts address the media and the international community by articulating the facts. And also, we have to continuously be vigilant what is going on internally in Ethiopia. It's not just a Western issue. It's not just a Sudanese and Egyptian problem. The reason why Sudan came and took about 40, 50 kilometers deep into our border, the land, is because there is instability in Ethiopia. The northern command was attacked by the former rulers of the Tigray region. And we have instability in other parts of Ethiopia. We have to solve and minimize our differences internally to get respect and strength externally. Even the GERD issue will not be resolved unless we stop the instability and the issues we have in the same region in Benishangul area. So it's a multifaceted effort. We have to work with the international community, international experts. We have to work with the diaspora. We have to also get our house in order, and we have to conduct this election in a peaceful manner. So we'll get that behind us and help Ethiopia move forward. And everything we do has to be based on facts. Even the situation in Tigray, we have to base that on facts. The people of Tigray are brothers and sisters. I've said this before. Capturing Mekelle is winning a battle. The eventual war we have to win is the hearts and minds of our brothers and sisters in Tigray. We have to work on that. We have to give all we can to alleviate their sufferings due to the collateral damage of the war. So those are the things we have to work on and help the country move forward.
Professor, would you like to add something here?
Maybe I'll just pick up on the reference to reporting the facts and the truth. I think this is critical before the country and the Tigrayan population itself can move forward with any meaningful reconciliation and dialogue process. And I think some sense of closure, although not closure per se, but some sense of being satisfied with the truth and the facts is required. So I think based on the sheer complexity of this conflict, the polarized narratives, unveiling that truth is critical. And I think the only thing that can lead to this is an in-depth intellectual forensic investigation. And I think, a professional and well-resourced forensic investigation has never been so important in Ethiopia as it is now. And I think as the country has done already, it needs to appeal to its friends and its partners to help resource them on this issue, to bring in some independent adjudication capacity, as well as the resources required to unearth that evidence that is really vital. So I just, I believe that the population really needs for that truth to be established. It's very difficult to do because of the dynamics that are at play at the moment. But there are ways, there are resources, and an investment has to be made in this area.
All right, thank you, Professor. Mr. Copley, let me come to you. Let's talk about the law enforcement operation that Ethiopia had to take following the treacherous attack on the North Command to ensure law and order in the country. And nowadays we're hearing a distorted image of this, and they are trying to even put the blame on the National Defense Force. In your view, what are the reasons for this and what should be done?
The answer is that, firstly, the Ethiopian government has to start to control the narrative to some degree, to at least balance the opposition narrative. Part of that is to also tell the outside world and the populations of Ethiopia and Tigray province particularly, region particularly, is that the TPLF does not represent the Tigrayan people, and that the war has been waged against the Tigrayan people by the TPLF, not just lately, but historically, when the TPLF was during the imperial era, was a secessionist force not representing the population of Tigray. So we've got now definitely a false narrative which is put out, and that must be countered because, and by the way, the TPLF, the OLF, the Egyptian government are never going to participate in a war in which facts and the truth dominate. So the reality is that in order to gain credibility, firstly, the Ethiopian government has to be seen to be telling the truth, and that is critical, as Professor Fitz-Gerald just said. But it has to be done in such a way that it absolutely destroys and undermines the arguments being postulated against Ethiopia. Ethiopia does have the right, in fact, the mandate to maintain law and order throughout the country. And this right has been taken from it largely because of the TPLF-dominated government, which was a divide and rule sort of government, which attempted to divide the country on so-called ethnic or linguistic lines. It armed various militias within each of these regions and created, as we saw Tito create in Yugoslavia, the capability for each of these regions to start to solidify their campaigns against their neighbors and their former friends. Part of this law and order campaign has to be, and again, Dr. Abiy is supporting this, has got to be to recreate the sense of Ethiopianness. And he started to do that with the Victory of Adwa celebration, which the government has finally embraced once again, and something which the Crown Council of Ethiopia has been doing for decades, basically celebrating this anniversary as a source of Ethiopian, as a source of what can happen when Ethiopia unites as a country. Of course, the TPLF was building its momentum on divide and rule. So essentially, the true message as to what's been happening in this conflict following the attack by the TPLF on the Northern Command Garrison, needs to come out. But there is no vehicle right now for that to happen. Ethiopian diplomacy has been, if you like, missing in action since this whole situation began. And I know the Ethiopian ambassador to the United States, for example, is an incredibly hardworking and well-intentioned person, but he is up against real professionals who have billions of dollars at their disposal. Yep. And the TPLF lobbying group in Washington is organized on a scale which is profound and intense, and they have real inroads into the Biden administration. Biden administration has already accepted this situation. As with the Yugoslav breakup, no major politician will go against the media trend. And if the media trend says Serbs bad, Croats good, they will go with that argument. Similarly, they are already going with that argument about Ethiopia in many respects, because they think of Ethiopia today as though it were the Ethiopia of the Derg or of the TPLF era. And there's no updating, there's no education, if you like, of the world as to the strategic importance of Ethiopia. And particularly, there's no understanding of how, if like a reunion of Ethiopia and Eritrea could actually become the most important strategic element in the Red Sea, Suez sea lane, which is critical to global trade. Neither, by the way, is Ethiopia satisfactorily balancing the Egyptian threats against it. Egypt is saying that it will and can resort to direct military force to coerce Ethiopia. Frankly, the statistics on the ground don't match that claim. It would be very, very difficult for Egypt to, through sheer military force, engage Ethiopia. But Ethiopia has to remind Egypt that Ethiopia, which could be a great ally of Egypt, would be a dreadful adversary to have in the long term if Egypt persisted with this line of events. And not only that, make the argument that the Egyptian claims on the Nile waters are absolutely factually invalid. And the fact is that Egypt has been mismanaging the Nile waters. Ethiopia is doing nothing to take away from the Nile waters, but Egypt has so mismanaged its Nile flow that it has actually damaged the historical monuments infrastructure of Egypt near the Delta. It's actually led to poor agricultural and irrigation practices.
I think some sort of immediate investment in strategic communications capacity to front the public relations effort on the ground in Tigray, very important. I mean, not just on the ground in Addis Ababa, which has been happening directly through the press effort, but with the situation surrounding the election, the communications on the situation in Tigray is bound to get diluted from an Addis base only. So a team needs to be on the ground. A good, articulate spokesperson needs to front that effort with technical advisory support on the humanitarian issue, the political issue, and the security issue. And just like Boris Johnson does on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis during the pandemic, gets in front of the British public at 11 o'clock every morning. The British public expects and anticipates that effort, and a trust-based relationship becomes built between the public viewing that update and the person giving that update. So that communications effort has to comprise a team, and that team will, over time, develop a trust-based relationship with the population that is speaking to. But the technical support propping whatever team is put on the ground up needs to focus on facts and evidence that is collected daily and that is reported on at least weekly. And these briefs will be picked up by the international media. You know, whatever efforts that ambassadors and embassies go to put statements together, these are not picked up by international media the way that a narrative would coming out of the region itself. So I think that it would be a powerful effect. It would also be showing a proactive approach to this reporting, and reporting that is not being ambushed by any adversarial tactics.
Ethiopia is a country of 120 million people. Surely we should be able to afford a daily briefing at 3 p.m. Ethiopia, Addis Ababa time like now, or 4 p.m. It will be 9 a.m. in the morning, New York Times. And if we have a daily briefing and keep all the major news people busy, give them information based on facts, then they won't go around and make up stories based on some false premise that the propaganda machine of TPLF is putting out every minute and every second. So we need to do that immediately. The Ethiopian government must have a daily briefing to update the international community, to update the media. If there are some mistakes, you need to face it and put it out and ask for apology and move on. Otherwise, if you let something fester, it will have a life of its own and it comes back and bites you.
What we need to see is not just coming out with a daily statement on the truth, but that's how you frame that is critical.
Yep.
It's got to be not just in Amharic, but it's also got to be in Tigrinya. It's also got to be in English and French at the very least, and possibly Arabic. Look, the Ethiopian government right now has very few allies in the world. One of them is going to be Saudi Arabia. The other one is going to be UAE. If the government and the Prime Minister is to have a daily briefing, and I agree with Professor Fitz-Gerald that that's critical, then that should be somehow force multiplied by having it directly put into outlets in London, Washington, and the like, so that this can't be avoided. What happened in other occasions is if you don't have enough force to carry the message, and that's often a financial force, then you no matter how well-intentioned or how honest you are, your efforts will be lost.
Let's talk about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. As you know, Ethiopia is building its dam to lift millions of people out of the poverty line while causing no significant harm to downstream countries. However, some countries are trying to thwart such efforts. What's your take here, Professor?
Thank you very much. I mean, it's an important question, and I don't think we should underestimate at all the magnitude of the issue concerning the GERD. Such an important resource, important to lift out millions of Ethiopians out of poverty, but also to help the country achieve all the sustainable development goals. And really capitalize on a resource that has been underexploited for many, many years. So, but I think we need to understand the geopolitics of this. And this is something that I find has not been written about extensively and in circulation yet. It goes beyond the fact that Sudan has had its sanctions lifted by the US, and as a result has become a bit more bellicose, like Egypt, especially as Sudan's military now sits as part of the Transitional Council and government. You have Egypt, and let's remember that Egypt is an important ally for the US government, especially on the Middle East peace process. You have a very strange kind of alliance, a very tight alliance seems to have developed between those countries. And in comes the Democratic Republic of Congo president, who has taken over the chair of the African Union. He himself hosts the Grand Inga Dam in the Congo, and in 2019, I think, we saw statements made from the Congo suggesting that it too aspires to provide hydropower to the continent.
The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a major thing in the modern history of Ethiopia. There has never been a project like that. And we have to handle that situation also diplomatically by talking to Egypt and also being firm on our stand. I mean, we have to go with the second filling of the GERD. But we also have to articulate and convince, just as the professor said, lobby and convince not only the international media, but also the Egyptian people. We have to tell them that it took Gamal Abdel Nasser 11 years to build the Aswan High Dam. And he didn't see it run, he passed away, but in 11 years, they built the dam, they filled it, it's almost 50% more capacity, the water holding capacity of the dam compared to the GERD. And yet it only generates 1/3 of the electricity. And they didn't talk to anybody when they did that. In fact, the US and Britain were against that. And the Egyptian went to Russia, and they got a loan from Russia, and they used about 30,000 engineers and construction workers to build that thing and complete it in about 11 years. So we have the right for Nile waters. We are not going to hold the water. Everything goes in and out. It's an energy and mass balance. And we have to do, just like we do in engineering, energy and mass balance, we have to have a narrative balance. Now, the Egyptian government is spending millions and millions of dollars in telling the world they cannot live without water. Ethiopia is going to hurt them. And we are always going and being nice and trying to beg them and change their reasoning. It doesn't work that way. We have to play hardball in the international media. And the way you do that is by hiring competent people and articulating it, just like having a meeting like we're doing now, because everything we do in Amharic within our own circle is like an echo chamber. Nobody hears it. You have almost 1,000 people dead in my cadre. We have videos in Amharic and everything else. And yet somebody will go there after killing the people. They say, no, it's our people who are actually dead. You have to show the people. You have to have a videotape, which we are planning to have for this show if we can, and dub it with English, French, German, whatever language you can, and then give it out to the media. We have to do the same thing with the GERD. We have to build it. We have to campaign for it. We have to lobby for it. And we have to try to convince the people that this is the only way we can save Ethiopia out of poverty.
Mr. Copley, would you like to add something?
So this is a matter of diplomatic style. It's a matter of the Ethiopian government understanding how to negotiate something like this and how to achieve a political outcome which would accord with the reality as we know it on the ground, that A, Ethiopia does have upstream riparian rights to control the waters. B, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is not going to interfere with the flow of Nile waters. And thirdly, that Egypt needs to come up with a plan to actually improve the fatally flawed Aswan High Dam so that it desilts it, so that it increases its own hydroelectric power. And perhaps fourth, and there are many points, but Ethiopia needs to tell the world that the predominant client for electricity from the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was intended to be the Sudanese people. This saves Sudan from its energy problem. It actually creates wealth, it saves lives in the Sudan.
It's not like, badgering the Ethiopian government. If it's not working, let's have a plan to make it work. Using the same method, the same people, the same technique, and again and again expecting a different outcome is what an insanity is.
If Egypt wishes to make existential threats against Ethiopia, then it has to face the consequences of those threats. And Ethiopia, threatened as to its very existence, would have to respond appropriately to Egypt. And all of this, of course, can be avoided because the real opportunity for Egypt is not in attacking Ethiopia over the Nile waters, because frankly, that although Egypt keeps needing more water because it's got a bigger and bigger population, the reality is it needs to address its own water usage, which has been doing very poorly, and it needs to start creating a combined economic region with Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Sudan, and Djibouti, and arguably Somaliland, to really dominate the Red Sea Mediterranean region with a new economic vitality.
Egypt needs to realize that if they choose to damage the dam and resort to war, somebody has to tell them that Ethiopia still controls all the tributaries to the Blue Nile, and we can build a zillion and one activities, irrigations, and dams, and we can really affect the amount of water, the cubic meter of water that goes to the Nile. They need to know that. I mean, they might damage this dam, but they will damage their entire future, the entire agriculture and water resource. So it's not a simple thing.
Professor Anna Fitz-Gerald, Mr. Gregory Copley, and Engineer Hezkel Eskinder, thank you so much for your wonderful perspectives, and I hope we will meet sometime again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, dear viewers, with that we come to the end of this program. Many thanks for your company so far. Until I see you with another program, it's goodbye from me, Shufar Alakal. Stay safe and take care.